Not because everything was fine, but because conflict felt heavier than compromise. Because silence felt safer than honesty. Because I believed that if I stayed calm, reasonable, and understanding, things would eventually balance out. They didn't. Peace, I learned, can become expensive when you're the only one paying for it. If this story is touching you, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there. At first, keeping the peace felt like a strength. I was the one who smoothed things over, who saw both sides, who didn't escalate small moments into unnecessary tension. I told myself this was maturity, emotional intelligence, growth. When something bothered me, I minimized it. When a line was crossed, I explained it away. When I felt uncomfortable, I told myself it wasn't worth the argument. And for a while it worked. Conversations stayed calm. Relationships stayed intact. Nothing exploded. But something else began to happen quietly, slowly, almost invisibly. I started disappearing from my own life. Every time I chose peace over truth, I made a small trade. I gave up a reaction, a boundary, a need. At first, these trades felt harmless, temporary, but they accumulated. I noticed it in the way I hesitated before speaking, and how I rehearsed my words to make them softer, easier to accept, and how I adjusted my tone before I even knew what I wanted to say. I wasn't expressing myself anymore. I was managing myself. The role of peacemaker came with expectations. I was the one who wouldn't react, the one who would understand, the one who would let it go. And because I had done it so well for so long, it became expected. My silence was mistaken for agreement. My patience was mistaken for comfort. My flexibility was mistaken for consent. And I kept going. I kept the peace when comments stung. I kept the peace when decisions were made without me. I kept the peace when I felt that quiet ache of being overlooked. I told myself it was the price of harmony. Until one day, I realized the cost had become too high. The moment wasn't dramatic. It didn't come during a fight or a breakdown. It came during an ordinary conversation, one I had lived through many times before. Someone spoke over me, dismissed something I said, made a decision as if my presence alone meant approval. Normally, I would have adjusted. I would have stayed quiet, smiled, told myself it wasn't worth it. But something inside me paused. I felt tired in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. Not tired of them, tired of myself, tired of shrinking, tired of absorbing, tired of calling it peace when it felt like erasure. That was when it hit me. Peace wasn't neutral anymore. It was costing me clarity. It was costing me self-respect. It was costing me my voice. And I realized something else. No one had asked me to sacrifice this much. I had volunteered. The silence that followed that realization felt heavier than any argument I had avoided. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine what would happen if I didn't smooth things over. If I didn't protect everyone else from discomfort. If I didn't keep the peace at my own expense. The idea scared me. Conflict had always felt like failure, like something to be prevented at all costs. But now, silence felt worse. The next opportunity came sooner than I expected. Another familiar moment, another assumption, another quiet expectation that I would let it go. This time I didn't. I don't agree with that, I said. My voice was steady, but my body reacted instantly. My heart raced. My hands felt cold. Years of conditioning don't disappear in one sentence. The reaction around me was immediate. Surprise, discomfort, confusion. Someone laughed lightly as if I were joking. Someone else tried to explain why it wasn't a big deal. I listened. And then I said, I'm not okay with it. That was all. No accusation, no emotional speech. No demand, just honesty. The peace broke. Not explosively, but noticeably. The room felt different, tighter, less predictable. And for a moment, doubt rushed in. Had I overreacted? Had I created unnecessary tension? Was this my fault? Those questions had ruled my choices for years. But this time, something else answered them: relief. For the first time, I wasn't carrying everyone else's comfort on my back. The days that followed were uncomfortable, not because people were angry, but because the dynamic had changed. I wasn't stepping in to smooth things over anymore. I wasn't filling silences. I wasn't apologizing for having an opinion. And without my constant effort, the peace everyone relied on felt fragile. I realized then how much work I had been doing behind the scenes. Keeping the peace wasn't effortless. It was labor. Emotional labor I had been performing quietly, without recognition, without rest. And now that I had stopped, everything felt different. I noticed how often my needs had been sidelined, how rarely my discomfort had been addressed, how accustomed others had become to my flexibility. Setting boundaries didn't make me aggressive, it made me visible. Not everyone welcomed that. Some people became distant. Some seemed irritated. Some suggested I was changing. I was, but not in the way they meant. I wasn't becoming difficult. I was becoming honest. I stopped swallowing reactions just to keep things calm. I allowed tension to exist without rushing to fix it. I let silence sit instead of filling it with reassurance. And slowly, something unexpected happened. I felt lighter. The peace I had been chasing externally started forming internally. I slept better. I spoke more clearly. I trusted my instincts again. The cost of peace had been too high, but the cost of honesty was something I could finally afford. If you're watching this and you've been keeping the peace for a long time, ask yourself this: what is it costing you? Because peace that requires your silence isn't peace. It's avoidance, and avoidance always sends the bill eventually. I kept the peace for years, until peace cost me too much. And choosing myself was the moment I finally felt at ease.